Hi, good morning. Welcome to the CIDCI Online Salon Series. I'm Margie O'Driscoll, and on behalf of the CIDCI Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you here today. CIDCI's mission is to accelerate change in the built environment by convening innovators for educational programs. We also serve as a trusted source of information about innovation. Special thanks to our sponsors who make all of this possible. CIDCI is a not-for-profit organization that relies on your financial support to provide these free programs. Many of you have received a renewal invoice to continue your support for 2021. Please respond as generously as you can. Since the pandemic began, epidemiologists have warned us of a cold weather surge. Our European CIDCI participants have endured this period, but here in the Bay Area, our dangerous winter has arrived. Now, more than ever, mask up, wash your hands, and for goodness sake, no indoor dining at the French Laundry. That's a joke for local people. Be kind, take care of yourself. Okay, here's a bit of information about how today's session will work. We're recording this presentation and we'll place a recording on the CIDCI website as soon as possible. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please use the chat box. We'll get to as many questions as we can. Today's presentation features folks from Walter P. Moore. The presenters include Eileen, Phan, Timon, Hazell, and Ryan Seckinger. They're going to discuss implementing and scaling project-based innovation. Welcome. I think Ryan's going to get us started.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you very much, Margie. Thanks for the great introduction. And we too on the East Coast will avoid dining indoors at the French Laundry.
Definitely.
And thank you for those of you that are joining us at 8 a.m. on the West Coast. We're still drinking coffee over here, Margie, just like you. So it's 11 a.m. but that's good. So thanks for joining us. As Margie mentioned, I'm Ryan Seckinger. I'm principal and managing director with Walter P. Moore. And I'm really glad today to be joined by Eileen and Timon. Eileen is a technical designer in our DC office, and Timon is a senior technical designer in DC as well. We're going to talk a little bit today about how we've built a culture of innovation at Walter P. Moore and some of the challenges that we've run into. Really, we're very interested in innovation broadly in the AEC industry and in bringing kind of our industry forward with us on our projects. And so this is a topic that's close to our heart, and hope that we can share a bit about what we're learning with you as well. So we're a company that's spread across primarily North America, but with international offices in India, Panama, and Canada as well. From a business perspective, we're set up without profit centers between our offices. So when we're thinking about creating a culture of innovation, part of what's critical for us is to quickly find out what's happening in the pockets of innovation and scale that across our platform and take advantage of what we're learning all over the world as quickly as possible. The projects that we work on are big and small, but some of the most complex in the industry. And so really, in order for these projects that we're working on to be successful, we need to innovate on every project. And that's both from an implementation of technology perspective in design or in the field, but also on a process perspective. How do we work better together to meet these aggressive schedules and complex projects, and really achieve the design vision that the owner is going for across all of these different types of projects? So that's very important. Another aspect when thinking about how we set up our culture for innovation is this journey that we've been on most recently to pull together multiple threads in order to develop what we're calling internally this transformative integrated delivery. So, how do we take and combine advanced model-based delivery? So, high LOD models of structures and enclosure systems, pulling that together with solution finding that's transdisciplinary or across disciplines, really finding solutions that are at the intersection of these disciplines, not siloed disciplines, and then rethinking deliverables. So we see these different threads as coming together really over the last 20 years in our practice and converging into something that with our partners in design and construction can really make a difference in transforming how we deliver projects. So another really important inspiration on our innovation journey for us has been Lean and our involvement in LCI and really looking at continuous improvement in the industry. And one thing that's really important with this is that people are put at the center of the process. So again, as we're thinking about how do we develop a culture of innovation at Walter P. Moore, applying to the projects that we're working on, this idea of people at the center of the process and looking for continuous improvement, elimination of waste, this again has been a big inspiration for us. So really, as we've been thinking about how do we want to innovate, how do we want to set up our company for innovation, we've considered a few different options, and these are all, you know, not necessarily good or bad, but different options. The first option there on the top left with the orange stick figure, this is more of the hierarchical or top-down approach to innovation, where you have one great innovator at the top, like a Jeff Bezos or a Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, who's got this idea and is the face and vision of the innovation, and is then telling everybody else in the organization, this is what we do. So that certainly has some benefits from a clarity perspective. The teams are only having to listen to one person, and right or wrong, whatever they say goes. So some less challenges with communication perhaps there, but definitely that's one approach. Another approach, this option 2, would be to have a dedicated, separate standalone R&D team, like a Lockheed Skunk Works or an AT&T Bell Labs, that's focused only on innovation and then pushing those innovations to the different teams. So this approach is decoupling innovation from, in our case, the project or client interface. So that can allow for some disruptive innovations to come. But it's definitely separate from where the work is actually happening day to day. A third option would be a more distributed option, where on each of our projects, everyone's kind of left up to their own devices to figure out what works best for them. And the fourth option is where we've landed, and what we really are excited to talk with you about today is this idea of scaling project-based innovation. So we've taken this approach of having some centralized leadership that's really a person and a team of people. So a centralized leadership structure that is able to roadmap out and understand what the big picture is of where innovation needs to be happening as a team, but then working to create an infrastructure and really ecosystem between project teams that allow that innovation to be shared, to be really standardized, and then scaled across the organization. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is this idea of scaling project-based innovation. And from our perspective, what's really important about this is we want to be innovating at the project interface. We understand as design partners, we're primarily structural and enclosure engineers with a focus on that part of the project cycle. We don't have control over an entire project or product delivery cycle. So we really need to bring our innovation to the project interface, focus on what's valuable for the client and the project team, and innovate there. It's not as valuable for us to have a separate disconnected innovation team that's not connected to the project interface. So that's what we're looking at today and discussing. So Timon's going to talk a little bit more about how that works its way out on projects for us.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So as one of those participants, as one of those players on the team, the way I've really seen it's been successful is that, like Ryan said, our change and our workflows are being adapted at the project level. Sometimes people think about workflows and changes mostly around technical issues, but there's obviously, like he mentioned, management, other processes, and this same research and development kind of project-based innovation happens on those types of activities. Innovation happening and change happening at the project level means that innovation is not happening in a particular research and development team, but every project is really empowered to be the research and development for our company. This allows for quick iteration and adjustment for any project to grow People who are working on the project oftentimes see the needs and the problems, and they can iterate around those really quickly. In order to scale that change, it takes communication. Constantly sharing about changes implemented on one project helps carry them over to another project later. We'll show a few of the avenues we've set up to allow for this communication across our entire firm. But in the end, it gives us a natural growth of ideas from one project to others. Change or innovation, we found, isn't a one-time thing, nor a one-way street. We found that the second or the third project, they iterate upon the change that's happening, and the original project is often able to take on those changes quicker and easier. So we'll share this in a couple of stories, but in the end, what we get is a distributed team of innovators. It's not a perfect formula. It takes effort, alignment, communication, and we'll share about some of those struggles we faced as we go as well. So the first story we want to talk about, we call it Concierge, after the internal application we developed to solve the massive need to reduce internal waste in delivering projects, one of those lean principles that Ryan was talking about. So on one of our larger projects, the team was struggling with regular non-valued added tasks of creating internal work product. This wasn't work that was stimulating the creative juices in the team and was taking a really large portion of the team's efforts. After putting all of this together, printing, exporting, Navisworks, updating Bluebeam files, running QC tools, the team summarized it all together as 16 hours or 2% of the team's effort was being wasted on creating these internal work products. They needed a better way. So the team researched existing applications that exist, and they landed on developing our own flexible concierge tool that could update the PDFs and print export weekly IFCs for the team without human supervision. It was a solid win, and they were able to cut out half of those mindless jobs we just talked about. And one of the champions shared it in a bi-weekly champions call, a call set up to share knowledge with other digital champions and other project teams. And I'd like to say the excitement was picked up, and right away we saw a second team pick it up. But the reality is we often talk about something 2, 3, maybe even 12 times before a particular idea is taken on by another project. Once it's finally implemented by the second team, they often aren't satisfied with the status quo, and they add a third thing. So in this case, it was Navisworks exports to the concierge service, and the first team quickly adds that service to their change as well. The excited project managers shared this in a project managers meeting, and a third project was able to pick this up. As new pieces get added with each project, it's easier for the earlier projects to take it on. It's not quite as big of a hurdle for those projects to implement the change that they've already started. This is kind of where we're at right now with Concierge. And if you look at this image, it's not perfect. We see people who are excited in the orange across on projects that aren't able to implement it. They haven't overcome that hurdle. And then we see naysayers or people who are maybe a little less adapt to change, who are on the projects that are actually adapting it. And we found this is life. And it's really important to listen to those variety of voices that exist, because they can also help to drive which changes are truly valuable for a team. So it's important to get that diversity of thought across the projects. In order to make all this happen, I mentioned communication, and there's lots of it. Here's kind of an example. So our project teams will meet regularly, internally share, kind of figure out, iterate through things, and then they will share it at, for example, a digital champions call or a BIM champions call or a technical designers call. All of these intended for junior staff members to learn about what other people are working on and doing on their projects. Project managers will meet and have a similar type of call. But for the best results, what we found, not only do these individual meetings and then office-wide and company-wide meetings have to happen, but people need to be in each other's meetings as well, so that cross-pollination, hearing about something from a project manager's perspective might tell you one thing, hearing it from more of an implementer's perspective might give you a different perspective. And it's important for people to hear from both perspectives if they're going to take it onto their project. Obviously, everyone has to be on board to do that. And Concierge was shared about at about 6 or 8 of these meetings as it was growing before we saw growth. Now it's implemented on multiple projects. The second project Eileen's going to talk about is about quantity tracking and the way we've changed that over the years.
Thanks, Timon. So the second PBI I'm covering is quantity tracking, and we typically care about quantity tracking because of cost and environmental impacts. It can help us evaluate where we can do better and potentially even optimize our design. If we have good data in combination with good modeling, we should always know what's inside of our project. So in our story, I'll be highlighting that the change is iterative and that it can occur through multiple projects. I'll be summarizing how a quantity tracking tool was created on project A and how it was continuously being tweaked to be used on project B, C, and D based on what was considered valuable to the project team. We'll start off with understanding what we currently have to begin with and how to generate ideas for what we potentially want. So for quantity tracking, the first thing that we did was we displayed all of the quantities on our drawing sets, and this coupled with our visualization next to the schedules show us exactly what we're looking at and what the quantities are for. And if you have multiple of these drawing sets printed from different points in time, you'll be able to compare them side by side and see what the changes in the quantities were. So this was really beneficial for us to just like at a quick glance, see what's in our project, what the total count of the steel was, and how it compared to a different point in time. And you can also export all of this information into Excel. Inside of Excel, it was beneficial for us to kind of sort the data the way that we wanted to. And if you wanted to manipulate the data, you were able to add potential contingency factors on here and see what the total quantity would be afterwards. And another thing that you can do, or what we did do, was look into Power BI just to see how we can further visualize the data that we have in Excel already. So here you can see like data points for how the structure was broken down by structural types or by section type. And here at a quick glance, you can just see overall like what the breakdown is of your tonnage and what the actual total tonnage would be. So with the data points, it's kind of like hard to visualize like what these are all coming from. So sometimes it's easier to visualize it in graph form. So here what we're looking at is the different section sizes that we're using on a particular project. And what this tells us immediately is that we have a lot of different section sizes on the project. And perhaps if we kind of condense it down and lessen the uniqueness of the section sizes, then we would be able to reduce the cost. So taking all of this into account with the data points, with the Excel sheets, with the visualizations, we were able to gather all the information that we've learned and create our first iteration of our quantity tracking tool. So here we have a Power BI spreadsheet, and you can see that we've used a combination of the visualizations, of the tables, of the data points, and in the center, you can easily really quickly see what we have as our current tonnage and make sure that, you know, we're below the target value. So quantity tracking isn't a new concept for us or anything, and it wasn't surprising that another team had developed a similar tool at the same time. And the spreadsheets look really different from one another. And the only reason we were able to find out that another team was developing a very similar tool was that we all gathered in a meeting, say the digital champions call that Timon highlighted earlier, where someone shared this with the group saying like, hey, they're developing something like really cool. Maybe it'll be valuable for other projects to use. And then someone else came up on the call and said, hey, I'm actually developing something like very, very similar. Why don't we get together and kind of combine the tools and see if we can create kind of a flexible template for future use for all the other projects. So that's kind of what we did. They kind of differentiate or highlighted the changes or the differences between the two spreadsheets here and combined them together and improved on the tool as well. So the next iteration we have is quantity tracking over time. So instead of tracking quantities at one point in time, we would have a spreadsheet that shows how the quantities are changing over time. And you can kind of click on the different dates just to see what the quantity was at that point in time and see if it decreased or increased. So this was kind of like the beginning template for all the other projects to use and what people can kind of like tweak and manipulate based on their project needs. The next iteration that we have is tracking embodied carbon over time. And this one was used to see what was contributing to embodied carbon and are we meeting the target goal. So these kind of spreadsheets help us start conversations for how we can potentially improve our design. The fourth iteration, which is where we are right now, is combining all of these different databases and spreadsheets into one. So before we were just looking at individual spreadsheets highlighting like one project at a time. And now we're starting to combine all of them together to kind of create this master database so we can compare the different projects to one another and potentially even use this in the future for quick estimates to say like, if we have a similar size project and scope, maybe we can refer to a different project that we've done in the past just to see like the quantities and the embodied carbon that we had on there just to get kind of like a rough estimate. And the key takeaway from this whole quantity tracking development and iteration process that we had was that we needed to create a tool that was flexible enough to be tweaked based on what was valuable to the project team internally and externally. And it was very important for us to be able to release developments at consistent increments and on a consistent basis just to gather feedback rather than waiting for a final product to be finalized and polished to share with the team. And we did that by after improving on the tool a little bit and share it with the team, gather feedback. If it's something that they don't like, then remove it from the tool. If it's something that they do want to see, then kind of incorporate it and then send out another product release. So the third story that Timon will be bringing to you is much larger and much longer.
Thank you. This third one really touches on almost all those four threads that Ryan mentioned. It's not really about a small process. It's about a bigger journey, specifically looking at two areas we as structural engineers can improve. This type of change, it really takes alignment, size of a change. It takes alignment from the top down. It takes alignment from the visionaries and the implementers. And then it also takes alignment with other disciplines and organizational groups. So what were those two massive flow problems that we're trying to solve? The first is an archaic design delivery process. In the last 3,000 years, we've gone from sketching on stone to sketching on paper to creating really complex 3D models and representations of buildings, only to do what? To print them out onto digital paper or PDFs. Sadly, in this era, it's the norm, and it really ought to be a flow of data that can go directly into construction. However, so often, again, it looks more like this. Check out this awesome model I spent making. The designer creates a 3D understanding of their building, prints it out to PDF, losing information in that process, hands it over to the construction team, who, seeing information lacking, writes out what he needs, builds an interpretation that can be used for construction, prints out that, and then asks the designer to manually review his printout. Clearly, we can all agree this is common on many projects and really a broken system. Our leadership and our technical gurus actually working on some of these projects got together. Again, this is not like the last few months. This has been over the last 10 or 20 years. And identified the direction that brought the most value was one where the detailer and the designer had more integrated connection. Without the loss of information 3 times in the process getting shop drawings, this streamlines the construction model generation and allows the design team to make decisions that'll help the downstream partners. This couldn't be done, however, without rebar benders and steel detailers on our team. And personally, I can say I'm really grateful to their input. We get regularly on how to make the design better because of their experience in the field. The second problem, very much related, was looking at the project schedule. Many AEC projects, as we know, again, I know I'm speaking to people who know this stuff, they follow a waterfall method of delivery, which once again limits the communication to one massive data dump or PDF dump at that point at the end of the CDs, and it's one single handoff. By integrating the design and the detailing team's schedules, thus stacking the waterfall, we see 2 added wins. The design team can see an increase in their coordination time, the owner can get a reduced schedule, and there can be smaller handoffs between the design and the detailing team, thus informing the design for a validated design each step along the way. As I mentioned, I'm so grateful to them for that. This is really simple to talk about, but it takes a lot of alignment. And especially to make this big of a change, it takes a lot of communication and training. It takes education. And one of our senior leaders traveled and taught each office more and more about LOD, and not only just what it means to design, but how now we were going to be held to a higher standard so that our data and our models could go into construction. Does the direction of the beam matter? Does precision of modeling matter? What changes does the design or the detailing team need to make to handle an integrated approach? How are upstream changes later in the design going to be handled by the downstream team? It also takes tons of communication. To have such an integrated approach, it takes agreement on detailing specifics at smaller milestone. It takes commitments to one another and involving many more stakeholders earlier on. What do we need to learn, own, share with the detailer, the architect, the owner, the structural engineer to be successful implementing such an update to our flow? And as structural engineers, we need to rethink our roles and realize that we ought to provide extra help to the schedule in order to keep a shorter schedule on track, especially for 2 reasons. The structure drives so much of it early on, and as structural engineers, that's the area where we actually can have an impact. With a shorter schedule and detailing happening during design, it's really important that all the stakeholders know what members are still flexible. What you're seeing on screen here is red are elements that have already been designed, maybe even gone out and been ordered early. And in gray, you're seeing the elements that are still flexible for change. That way, the team can order things and move early, but also leaves flexibility. And oftentimes, we're known for not being flexible as structural engineers, and this is really important to allow the team to iterate and change things, maybe move elevator locations, but maintain things that have to get ordered earlier to keep the schedule on track. Also, as we're moving into data and we're moving into providing this data into the model, if we're going to own the data, we need to validate it as well. What you're seeing is a graphic validating the materials and the elements in a human readable way. This validation method has evolved over the years, but if we as steel designers are pushing information into construction, the detailing, it's really important to have it right. And the detailing team can also ask and specify the things that they don't want to recreate over and over and over in each of these iterations, and we can put them into our model and provide them each time along the way. And that's where oftentimes those iterative conversations can help us know what information they need, and then did we provide it in the right way for them to use it, again in a machine readable way as we looked at that, and that became really important. And what do we get out of this? We get a model that can now go from LOD 300 or a design level model into a shop level drawing model. Oftentimes those are very separate processes, sadly, as we talked about, but now we're able to flow it a little bit. We're able to flow from one to the other. And no longer are we strapped to an archaic model delivery method, but project by project, we're growing our arsenal of tools, skills, and people. We have so much further to go, but it's been exciting to see the integrated approach grow and evolve. Remember, as Ryan mentioned, it's about people at the center of the change. And it has to be. The people who got us to this point in the change and iteration and growth, they're going to be the people that are going to adapt and change to the next situation that comes up. And that's something that we really, really value, is having a team of innovators, of adapters at every level, at the engineering level, at the project management level, so that they're ready for whatever next problem comes our way. These lessons, though, they really haven't happened overnight. And Eileen's going to show a timeline over over the last, I think, 10 years, showing some of these iterations.
Thanks, Timon. Yeah, that's right. So I'll be emphasizing the last 10 years, and we'll see how change in general has been taken across the last 2 decades for our company here. So it really doesn't happen overnight, takes a long time. So for us, the change has been occurring over the past 2 decades, and as time is going on, the projects only get more complex and the schedules are only getting tighter. So we need a way to kind of meet the demands of our deadlines. And in the past 2 decades, we've had two major shifts. We've had the CAD to BIM on the left and now the digital workflows on the right. And in each of these two shifts, we've had several phases. The phases include of the exploration, implementation, and improvement. So now we'll be taking a closer look at some milestone projects that happened along the way. Between these milestone projects, we've had other several projects occur where they're kind of like using the innovations that we've developed on these milestone projects. So we'll start off in 2008. In 2008, for the Marlins ballpark, we were able to use generative geometry. So nothing was manually modeled and nothing was manually being changed. They were all being computationally designed. And this was also the introduction of interoperability, where given the BIM model, we were able to create an analysis model directly from the BIM model rather than modeling the whole building twice in two different softwares. And along the way to the next milestone, we've had several other projects use the interoperability and generative geometry on their projects to test it out just to see what's working and potentially even tweak the process that was developed on Marlins Ballpark. In 2010, we were able to then provide interoperability tools for Tekla. So between 2010 and 2015, using interoperability between Tekla and the BIM model, we were also able to export a couple of shop drawings for some projects. And now in 2015, we were able to integrate the enclosures team and structures team to create one combined model. So this was the first time that we were able to do that. And since then, we were able to integrate with the facades and structures team on several other projects. In 2017, we were able to deliver both 100% CDs and a LOD 400 model in just 19 weeks. And following that, in 2018, we were able to increase coordination and even coordinate at a fabrication level. This wasn't done on previous projects before, and the team found it really valuable to have these conversations. This leads us to where we are right now. In 2020, we've had a lot of coordination, earlier coordination, and also increase in communication to prevent issues and improve design. We were seeing projects that were communicating weekly with the steel fabricator just to see, will this design work? Do we need to tweak it? Do you think that there could be improvements to this? And another example is we started talking more about embodied carbon. So here we have a building, just to say, with our current concrete mix design, this is the amount of embodied carbon we have. And how can we kind of like improve that? So you can see in the visualization where if we were able to change the concrete mix design, maybe at the top, like 2 floors that you see there, we can reduce the amount of embodied carbon. So we were able to leverage the data that we've had already just to have decisions made earlier on in the project. So with that, I'll be passing it off to Ryan to close the presentation.
Thanks, Eileen. And as we're looking forward, although the graph stops at 2020, we really see a continuation of that process. And I mentioned early on this idea of our transformative integrated delivery. We really see that happening. Kind of if we're looking back, the exploration was really happening around that time of the New Orleans airport, and we're really looking at on a complex project. We need experts from multiple disciplines working across their silos to come up with solutions that that couldn't otherwise be developed. So this idea of transdisciplinary solution finding on an integrated platform, a digital platform using these tools, that's where we see the future of our work going and really success happening on projects. And so I hope that you've been able to see a little bit today through these different project case studies, some of what we're learning, and both the struggles and challenges and some of the successes of really focusing on project-based innovation within project teams, and then working to scale that to our platform nationally on all projects. So that's been our goal. We're really focused on communication, on patience. This takes time, although many of us would like to see change happen overnight. Unfortunately, that's really not practical in our industry along the way, although I think we'll probably see change happening pretty quickly in the next 5 to 10 years compared to what we've seen in the past 5 to 10 years. And then this idea of team alignment. We know that we're one part of a larger team, and so much of the work that we do is focused on education, communication, coordination, and really helping the rest of the team understand and helping us understand from the rest of the team how we can work together to move these things forward. So that's what we've been learning. I see that there's some good questions in the chat box, and we'd love to continue the dialogue here for a while. Margie, should we just dive into the questions that we see, or do you want to moderate those with us?
I think if you just want to take them, Ryan, you probably know several of the people already who are asking the questions.
Okay, great. I'll go through a few of these, and then Timon and Eileen, feel free to add to what I'm saying, or else I'll probably some of these I could kick to you. The first question I see is, have we been able to deliver the model as a deliverable to contractors? And the answer to that is yes. We've done fabrication level modeling of steel, structural steel, rebar within concrete, some precast, tilt wall kind of embed structures and light gauge, all of those. I think the biggest challenge that we face really, and where unfortunately I spend a lot of my time, is that contracts are the biggest key in traditional distribution of scope. So, the question is a little bit more complicated than it seems, because sometimes we've done that work within IPD contracts, which is, the easiest, the least barriers, but oftentimes we're working, for multiple parties within one project. So maybe we have an agreement with an architect for our base services, and then some of the advanced model deliverables are under, either a CM or even sometimes, material suppliers. What we've found is the best case scenario is really this process is not, the higher level we can get with this process and the more pervasive, the more we can be impacting things like procurement strategy, figuring the project out virtually before we get to the field, as opposed to an alternate for a 2D shop drawing process, the better. And so our intent is to continue to work, as a partner as close as we can to the builder and to those figuring the project out virtually as possible. So definitely, yes, we have been able to do this. And then tying into the next question about cost feedback, and I'll be glad for Eileen to add some to this. What, in general, in our role, we're working together with trade partners and builders. What we want to do is, as early as possible, provide certainty around tonnage and complexity, because those are the two things that drive cost. If we can understand what are the quantities and how complicated it is, then we can get better cost feedback. So in general, we're getting feedback on pricing based on our quantities and complexity, and we're really working in an integrated way to figure out some of these key constructability issues. We do have in-house steel detailing and connection design and erection engineering and a lot of those disciplines, but it's always important for us to team with our external partners. And I think, Eileen, on some of those tools that you were showing, we were pulling in information from partners to inform cost. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. On the projects that I've seen we've used this tool on, we get kind of like the cost information from the rest of the team and we kind of integrate that on there once we kind of have like an agreed upon number so that we're comparing like apples to apples each time.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. And definitely, whether it's IPD or not, we're seeing more and more forms of target value delivery happening where we're working closely with, even design assist partners. So our goal is to take this lean thinking and really the IPD approach to every project that we're working on, and really provide leadership within the clusters that we're involved in, to focus on informing that costing effort. Timon, there's a
Ryan, I
question
want to
here.
come back to that first one about like delivering models to
Yes.
construction team, because I don't know everyone on the call, but I know oftentimes there's this question about like, well, wait, isn't there added risk when you do that? I think that's pretty much, I'm just going to ask that for whoever's thinking it. And we've talked a lot about the added risk that comes from not providing a model, and providing kind of like, again, I use the word interpretation, of the model. And that's how we've been working a lot right now. But in some ways it hurts the team, the overall team, if we're not kind of feeding it in that way. I don't know what you probably have something to add to that, but I thought
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Timon. That's a fantastic point. That's definitely one thing that we've heard quite often is, well, isn't that a lot of risk? And we've really gone wholeheartedly into with the mindset that the risky thing for projects is not figuring them out before we get to the field. That's what's risky for a project. And so we're really in this business to be a partner to figure projects out. We don't want to stand on the sidelines and kind of delegate all the thinking to somebody else and wash our hands of it. So we really see figuring the project out virtually before it gets to the field as the ultimate in risk mitigation. And so, certainly there's contractual and insurance issues to work through, and we've worked through many of those in different ways, but that's our mindset. So thanks for bringing that up, Timon. There's a question about what impact has the move to this distributed workplace had. I think that'd be a good one for you to jump on, Timon. I think one thing that I've seen for my position is just the time and effort that we've put into building a culture around trust and around distributed leadership and around alignment, and what Timon showed with all of those meetings and forms of communication and all of that was in place before this current COVID era. And so I see that being key to us having been, continuing success in doing what we're doing and not missing a beat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd love to get your
I don't
perspective
think, I
on
think
that.
if I like share very candidly, moving to remote, I don't think was easy for anybody. But I do think that one of the things it did for me in this kind of model idea sharing, just to answer Larry to your specific question, is that it kind of put everyone on a level field. Before there was, these three people who were in person and then other people on the call remotely. And there's always, I think there's almost harder communicating in a partially remote. And our firm is 100% remote right now. And so we're all in the same situations, kind of relating digitally. I think that one of the things, this is probably a little bit more on the technical side of things, but one of the things as far as like file sharing and things like that, we've been able to take advantage of Teams cloud services. And so everything's kind of on everyone's computers at the same time, almost going away from a server base for some of our files. And for the iterative types of things, that's been really, really helpful. So those are two things that come to mind for me. As we moved from in-person to kind of digital communication with regards to this. One thing I've recently started experimenting with is a sketching tablet, because I still like to be able to share ideas and talk to people kind of in person when you're kind of working through something, and that's actually really helped me. So no, I don't get a sales pitch or anything there, but that's been a couple of things just to share as much as I can.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one more thing to that one. I think collaboration now that we're working from home is a little bit more differently. Like you're not all in the same space, like say a conference room, writing on the whiteboard. And we've been experimenting with like different tools. Like I think just recently in the last month, we've been utilizing Mural more often. And we found that, in our like Zoom calls or our Teams call, everyone can go on and kind of contribute at the same time. So it has increased our collaboration that we've seen in the last several months.
Yeah, we used to do that on the wall, and now we're trying to find some virtual wall to do it on.
But one thing that we've talked a lot about that's really interesting is, when this happened in the point of when there was technology to support these kind of things. I mean, this would have been a totally different story if it were 5 or 10 years ago. But even some of the cloud-based tools, we're sitting on Zoom and Teams and being able, I mean, the last 6 months is the first time I've ever collaboratively built a PowerPoint presentation together, in real time. Things like that we've never had to do and we're having to do. And so I think, in some ways this is going to push innovation that wasn't there before. Eric, I see your question, interested in partnering with contractors. Yeah, certainly. And that's been out of necessity. Probably a decade ago, we started building, our construction engineering practice and pushing more and more into work directly for builders. And definitely we see, whether it's design, build, IPD, or other kinds of creative partnerships, that's where we see a lot of the future of our practice being is working closely with really anybody who's interested in figuring the project out, and putting, rolling up our sleeves and doing that work. And we see that happening virtually. We're actively working on projects now where, we're continuing each project cycle to change a little bit from the norm distribution of work. We have an extremely large project now where, we're doing all of the steel detailing through the LOD 400 model, and delivering that to the fabricator. And we're able to rework a process with the CM in this case, to enable that to happen and have all of that under us on the design side, and really impact procurement through doing that. So, definitely I think both on the process innovation side, the technology innovation side, and then the systems and materials side, we're seeing that happen across the board. So that's the last question I see in the chat. Certainly, if there's more questions there, we're glad to continue the discussion.
I have another question I'll throw your way, Ryan, while we're waiting for other questions to come in the chat. But you mentioned for a moment about kind of firm alignment and culture. And I mean, I know how things work day to day. I know this culture that I'm in, but how did we get there? How could someone else get there to a culture that allows this kind of innovation? Again, this is a filler as we, wait for another chat question. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I've seen all kinds of change happen over the last, decades as we've looked at that chart together. But, I think it's a combination of, clarity of vision and purpose. So we need to understand what the ground rules are for innovation. What are we trying to do as a firm? And then, effort on communication and alignment and transparency. So that's a big focus for us, from our CEO down is everybody has access to company financial information and project financial information and, what's going on in any given office. So, I think those things together support this culture of trust. And then kind of a constant learning mindset and growth mindset at the project teams where we're giving project managers permission and encouragement to take that next step and enable and empower project teams to try to do things a little bit differently. And so, I think it really is from the highest level all the way, when we hire a new graduate engineer, we spend time talking about things like, hey, your job is not just to learn how Walter P. Moore designs beams, but what's our process now, and really what tools are available that could change that process for the better. Speak up with those ideas, because that's what happens in this kind of environment of rapid change. Someone like me, I don't know the best way to do things anymore. I know how I did it. And then Timon, how you did it when you were doing that day to day was different than how, Eileen might do it. So we have to have alignment on what are the essentials that we can't compromise on. This is what we all need to be doing. But then here's where you have flexibility to do things different and really encourage that.
Yeah. I just
so yeah. Thanks for that question from Larry here. The culture as a key indicator for innovation sharing. Where does cultural fit rank in your hiring process? Yeah, so that's an interesting question as well. That's something we do talk about, and I think that's definitely an area of back to the other question on what's changed now in this environment. Things we put a lot of emphasis on internships and lots of face-to-face interaction with potential candidates. So that's something that we're figuring out now, and is definitely going to change in the years to come. I think cultural fit's extremely important, but cultural fit can mean, taken the wrong way, that can mean kind of a lack of diversity of views and styles and opinions. So it's not a very tight culture, but it's looking at hires for what they're going to bring to our culture and how it's going to be broadened and changed even. So I think that's a really important question. This kind of innovation really takes diversity in a team of background and also thinking and styles. And so, that definitely needs to go into the hiring process. So we hire at top engineering schools and architecture schools. And so, to a certain degree, technical competence comes through these master's degrees and other things that our candidates get. But we do our best, hiring comes through either knowing people in the industry or having internships so we can see how people really work. Because, I think more than anything, curiosity and a willingness to trust and ask the dumb question and engage and openness is really, and ability to communicate ideas. Those things are all just as important in this kind of environment as, knowing how to define the equation that's going to solve the problem. I think all of those things need to come together. Any other thoughts on that, Tim and Eileen, while I look at this next question here?
I mean, I think you answered it. It's so important. I mean, I kind of coming back to what we were talking about right before that question came in. I've been so surprised because I started another firm and came here. I've been so surprised how much flexibility I'm given and like trust that, oh yeah, if you think that's the direction we go, let's kind of check, make sure we're in alignment. Okay, yeah, like run with it. And I'm like, okay, but how do I know this is the right direction? And there's a lot of those kinds of conversations that happen. I think it kind of goes into this next question about continuous improvement also. Eileen, do you have any thoughts about culture?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I would just like to piggyback on what you were saying, Timon. I feel like every time you kind of like have an idea, people are like really supportive on like supporting your idea and kind of like making it come to life. And with like attracting like people to the company, I think it also really helps. We've done a couple of like I would say like outreach presentations, kind of like where we're guest speakers at some schools. And once you like do a presentation for some of like the college students or graduate students, you kind of like see if they have like alignment with your company. If they really like what you're talking about, then they'll come out and like reach out to you, and that's how you can get the conversation started to see who could be a potential fit too.
Yeah. And Ryan kind of mentioned the internship, right? That was like a really good like cultural interview in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So question from Bill, how have teams applied continuous improvement to improve during a project and then export it to the next project? I think one of my partners talks about, take the past and improve it by 10%. And so, of course, we're always looking for and wanting the home run disruptive innovation, but practically on projects, you're working within constraints of still needing to be very successful in delivering the project. So you need certainty on hitting the schedule, on not blowing the project budget. We have constraints that we're working within. And so, taking what we've done, and that's where our model of having some centralized strategy that informs each project is we can have a kickoff meeting and say, okay, where are the opportunities on this project for improvement, improving what we've done? What tools do we want to use on this that we've used in the past, and where can we improve it in a way that helps move the whole forward? And so in that way, each of our projects can tie in and look at what have we done in the past and how can we improve it. And so that's really, even if we just look at, the steel modeling process, that's a lot how that's worked, where, we've done connection design in-house and erection engineering, and we've added piece by piece to the point where we've figured out and built a team that, hey, this makes sense. This is a design task. Let's really figure the project out to fabrication level.
And even like steel detailing, we didn't add it at one time, right? There was like this era where we were providing more information on our design drawings about, some of the connection information that we thought was important to the building, but we weren't necessarily doing shop drawing level modeling.
That's right, because what we're looking for is a transformational process and evolution. We could just go out and buy a steel detailer and say, oh, we do steel detailing. We can do all this stuff, but unless that's going to be basically a repeat of the same process that exists in the industry, but with the same title block on both sets of drawings, right? I mean, that's not transformational. But if we do the work project by project to change our mindset and understand how to adapt our processes to make continuous flow happen and make constant improvement happen, then we can really see those things happen. So I see a question: has the integrated approach been seen and adopted by firms parallel but not within the structural domain? Yes, certainly. So within our firm, we're doing engineering on multiple practice areas, including structures, enclosures, parking, secure design. So our goal right now is to be integrated and unified in process within those. We've got good partners on the MEP side that we're interfacing with on projects and developing processes together, and then our architectural clients in the same way. And I think given that we've been working, we've worked under subcontractors on different projects and direct for builders. We've really worked with and worked, for just about every different kind of project delivery partner. So definitely, I think our intent is to be bringing this to the projects we're delivering. So I think certainly that's the answer.
I haven't seen it myself, but I know that I don't think we own the rule book on this integrated approach to innovation. I think like we've found one way to implement it, but I think that would be something I would just say there.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you see that question about LOD 400 models for steel fabrication on projects where we don't have a fabricator on the team during design?
Oh, so that's a great question. So, we really think
and we're also
value
running on the clock, so we should respect that as well.
Yeah, so I'll answer this in 30 seconds or less. So the answer is yes. We think that depending on the schedule and depending on kind of the nature of the project, there's often value in schedule and in pushing off committing construction dollars to allow the design to develop further, for us to take on the design side this modeling effort further, and allow more certainty on the procurement side. One thing that I think is broken in the industry is this idea of trying to manage risk by pushing risk to subcontractors who are competing for a project and are expected to be bringing their ideas while competing, while trying to get all the risk shed to them. Whereas if we work together as a team to figure out a schedule that allows us to further develop and coordinate a model prior to procurement, we can pull some of that work on the design side that's traditionally been on the construction side, but allow procurement to happen with more certainty, really without losing schedule. So that's been the goal on these projects where we've done that, and we still are valuing the input that the fabricators are bringing and their perspectives on how to actually build the project, but allowing procurement to happen at a different time really has a tremendous value. So I know we're up against 12 o'clock, Margie. Thank you for hosting us today.
Oh, thank you three so very much. Eileen, Ryan, Timon, this was absolutely an amazing presentation. We really cannot thank you enough. Really, really wonderful. Today, right now, I'm going to conclude CIDCI's online salon. We're going to record this and place it on the website as soon as possible. Please join us in the new year on January 7th for a very special session on McKinsey & Company's recently released report entitled Rise of the Platform Era, the Next Chapter in Construction Technology. We'll run that online webinar a little differently. Josh Johnson from McKinsey & Company will discuss this report with Jamie Johnston from the UK's Bryden Wood. So we'll have an international conversation that will probably run for 60 to 90 minutes. And finally, you can sign up for our mailing list, as always, at CIDCI.org. Thank you for joining us. If you've got thoughts or comments, use the Contact Us link on the website. Special thanks to Monica Zwissler for keeping us on track and the Walter P. Moore team for an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all in 2021. Be safe. Bye.
Thanks, Margie. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.